Well, good morning. Today we have something a little different for you. It's a personal celebration, and it starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
You know, there are times in our life when milestones become important. Today, I'd like to celebrate one of those because today marks the 400th time I've come on the air to welcome our audience to another edition of The Ryan Report. In other words, this is the 400th edition of a show that first went on the air in 2003. Now, I should point out one fact before you do the math. The show debuted in 2003. I did it for about 5 years, then left for a little over 6 years to serve on the Marquette City Commission. After that, I returned to the show in the spring of 2015. So I've been at it for about 8 years out of the last 15. You know, over that time, some things have changed. The show has appeared during 3 different time periods. We've also had 3 different sets. Obviously, the guests have changed, so I guess I've been the one constant factor. Although, in fact, I have to admit, I don't look exactly the same as I did 15 years ago. But you can be the judge of that for yourself. It just so happens we have a copy of that first show, and I'd like to show you a few minutes of just how it looked as the Ryan Report made its debut. Welcome to the first edition of the Ryan Report. I'm glad you could join us for our first show. A few words of explanation are probably appropriate. Many of you will likely recall that for a number of years I served as the manager of public affairs for Cleveland Cliffs, often appearing as a spokesman for the company on this station. Well, that's no longer the case since I retired at the end of July. Some of you will realize that my taking on this assignment is not really unusual, since I'm returning to a place where I spent about 9 years in an earlier part of my career. From the mid-60s to mid-70s, I was here at TV6 doing news, sports, and weather and handling some management assignments as well. All I can say is, it's good to be back. But now on with the first show. We're especially pleased to have as our first guest on our first show, Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm. And so after a year, are you still feeling good about your job?
I love this job. It is a very challenging time to be governor. I think it would have been a lot easier to be governor in the 90s when there was a lot of money to hand out. But I think the greatest privilege of all is exercising leadership in times that are tougher. That's really when your decisions have impact on people. And so it's a great privilege to be in the chair.
So this was not only the first edition of the Ryan Report, but for me, a return to WLUC-TV after many years. As I was thinking about that and planning the first show, I recalled that when I first started here, there were only 2 people who regularly appeared on the air each night. I did the news and weather, and a guy named Norm Koski did the sports. So I headed to the Copper Country to meet up with someone I hadn't seen for 40 years. Like me, Norm was semi-retired and still behind the radio microphone. I asked him how he wound up in television, and he recalled that it all started with a conversation with a guy named Tom Moore, who was the TV6 news anchor at that time.
I said, well, you know, Tom, I think had been into radio, and I asked him about how did you get into television? And, well, he told me, and then he says, you know, we're looking for a sports guy. Are you interested? And I said, well, yeah, but, you know, I've never been in a TV station in my life. You know, he said, well, why don't you come on down and audition? So I talked to the general manager and set up an audition. I went down there and into the studio and did some news and some sports. And then the thing I remember about that audition, they put me in front of a white refrigerator and they said, you've got 1 minute, sell it.
Well, he got the job, so eventually we wound up working together. So that's how the show looked in the very beginning. And here's a fact you may not recall. When the show first went on the air, it was on at 11:30 on Sunday night. It eventually moved to Sunday morning at 10, and then when we returned in 2015, it moved to its present time slot. We have another memory from those very early years. You know, in 2006, TV6 was celebrating its 50th anniversary. So I had a chance to talk with several guests about the early days. That group included Ray Adamini, who was the leader of a band that did a weekly show at that time, and Roy Peterson, who was the host of the first children's show on the station. At that time, he was better known as Darby 06. Let's check out those memories.
We were on there for 3 or 4 years, right from, I think we started in May or so, somewhere May or the end of May of '56.
So within a month or two of the station going on the air, you were on the air.
And it was a lot of fun.
And this was a once a week, it was a half-hour show?
Once a week, half-hour show.
It was about 7 o'clock in the evening, as I recall.
Somewhere around there.
I was just a kid back then.
I know you asked me what night, I don't remember, you know.
Yeah. What typically would you do during the show?
Well, we did all the songs of the day. You know, Lawrence Welk was very popular at that time, and Tennessee Ernie Ford and Pat Boone and Dinah Shore, they all had shows, and whatever popular songs they were, we'd simply play the song.
Just because you think you're so pretty, well, buddy, just because you think you're so hot, 2, 3, 4, just because you think you got something that nobody else has. Oh, you sweetie, you bunch of me.
You know, people realize, but this was really something because it was live TV.
Yeah, that's right.
We didn't have videotape back in those days.
If you made a clunker, it went over the air.
Did you have any disasters that you can remember?
Not really, not really.
Now, we have a picture, if we can call that up on the screen right now. People can see, here it is, it's one of your Darby 06 pictures. I think that's Barney Bear on your shoulder. But that was the black vest, the black derby hat, and the 6 on the front. That was Darby 06, and boy, I'll tell you, other than the glasses, you look like the same guy. Much of television programming really grew out of radio programming. Every radio station had a kids show. About that time, every television station had a kids show, and then of course your show was that example.
Well, it was one of those deals where the story was that we didn't have a children's program, evidently, if that was the thing to do at the time. The station management felt that it was necessary. Station manager came down to the floor here, to the studio floor where I was running camera, and said, we're going to have a children's program. We'd like you to do it. And that was on a Thursday. And I said, well, I've never done anything like that before. And no, this is going to work out pretty well. And I said, well, when does this start? Monday. Monday, and that was it. We had some cartoons to fill some time. And then we generated certain features. I'm putting features in quotes, believe me. But things like a birthday book where kids would hear their name on television, and then we started with guests, where kids would come in with their friends, or a scout group, or a church group, or whatever. So it was a way to have audience participation and involvement. And when you've got kids around, you're not going to go too far wrong.
Some memories from the early days of TV6 and the Ryan Report. We'll be back to share more as we celebrate the 400th edition of the Ryan Report in 2 minutes. Continuing our reminiscing on our 400th show, talking with people who make the governmental decisions that affect us all every day has been one of the high points of doing this show over the years. The guest lineup has included governors and lieutenant governors, U.S. and state senators, congressmen and state representatives, and a number of people in leadership positions in state and local government. On one of those visits, Michigan Governor Rick Snyder was able to help me celebrate a different career milestone. Now, keep in mind, this was 2 years ago. It was 50 years ago this week that I started working here at TV6. I joined the staff as the news anchor and weatherman, and I haven't been sitting in this same chair for 50 years. My career took some interesting twists and turns since then, but I'll have more to say about that at the end of the show. Right now, let's get on to the main reason for being here. After a very successful business career, Rick Snyder threw his hat in the ring in 2010, and the political unknown was elected governor of Michigan. In 2014, he was elected to a second term. He's a very busy governor, and we're pleased he took time today to join us. Governor, welcome to the Ryan Report.
Well, it's great to be with you, Don, and congratulations on 50 years. That's awesome.
Yeah, it just means I'm old, I guess.
No, well, actually, when I turned 50, which was a few years ago, I said the good part is I hope it's not that dark age and how people make it. I said I hope it's the onset of wisdom.
Well, I think that's what it is too. And I just keep going. Got
to be positive about these things.
Thinking about that, looking back at your career, which is very successful, was there a moment that really turned things on for you or set you in the right direction?
Well, the good part it started with my folks in terms of I've always had great mentorship, people that sort of gave me good advice. In terms of my political career, it's interesting. It actually happened, I was out to dinner one night with my wife in early 2009 talking about my concern for the future of Michigan, and she sort of called me out. She said, you're concerned, and she said, I'm concerned about our kids being able to stay in Michigan and find great careers and such, and she said we should talk about you running for governor.
And that was it.
And that's what sort of triggered it, and started off on that path. And the interesting part is when I got going, people may forget, nobody knew who I was.
Right.
So my early supporters, I actually have a nickname for them. I call them the Margin of Error Club. And the reason I do that is I'd actually have people come up to me when I first got started and say, did you know if you apply the margin of error, you could actually be a negative number in the polls? And I always thanked them for that, but you can see, I think it turned out pretty good.
Over the last 400 shows, we've also talked to countless local and regional officials. One of them was Michigan Tech President Glenn Meraz, who decided it was time to retire from that assignment this year. Here's part of that conversation. You know, we talked about your history the last time you were here, so I'm not going to dwell on it, but I still want to bring out what I think is pretty unique, and that is this fact that, you know, you're one of those guys who went to school, got on the faculty, and wound up being president of a school. That doesn't happen very often, does it?
No, it doesn't happen very often. It's pretty unique, but it's quite an honor too. And you know, it's a love affair with the university that starts when you're quite young, and
right.
And it's carried on all these years. It's really been great. And
even though you're pretty much planted in the UP, you weren't a Uper to start with.
No, I grew up in Chicago. My dad was a tool and die maker. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and they both believed highly in education. And how I got to Michigan Tech's a whole nother story, but I got to Michigan Tech and
everything
pretty much been there for a long time since.
Everything worked out. So you announced about a year ago that you wanted to step down as president. What led to that decision?
Well, it's been kind of a combination of personal and professional things. On the personal side, I'm 66, I'll be 67, you know, next year, and you know, you think you could do this forever because it's a lot of fun, but you know you can't. You know, there's one thing that could come along and that could set you back, and really the university's in really great shape right now. We're in the best financial condition we've been since the 90s, really, and our enrollment's been strong.
And that's a testament to you and your team.
Yeah, mostly the team, but you know, it's been a hard slog to get the university in good shape, and really when it's in good shape, then you have more options for the university to find somebody that's really good and can be the next steward of Michigan.
Carry it on. Any regrets now that the day is getting close?
Oh, just about every day. You know, sometimes you know, you think, oh my God, this is my baby, and I'm handing it over to somebody else, and then you think, well, you know, there's a lot of good people, and Michigan Tech will learn to live without me, I'm sure.
Glenn is now officially retired from his presidential duties, and we wish him the very best. Next on our memory parade, we look back to a conversation we had with a Marquette veterinarian, Tim Hunt, who loves sled dog racing. It gave us an opportunity to learn about how he got interested in that activity and his experience at the famed Iditarod.
Little did I know that most mushers don't have any money, and little did I know that I'd fall in love with working with these dogs. So what happened was suddenly I was starting to barter my services for some dogs, and then lo and behold, 4 became 8, 8 became 16 dogs, and that's how it kind of started back in '93.
We've got some video, and if I can get there we go. We're starting out with a couple of pictures here. Mm-hmm. Where was this?
This is the actual finish in Nome after I came in. It took us about 12 days to do the race. This here is actually during the race with the sun there. In that time of year, the sun's not up very long. It's pretty low on the horizon. Beautiful sunsets in Alaska. 16 dogs ahead of us there running through the trail heading up towards Huslia, which is up on the interior. At this point, it started to become very cold, roughly 30 below, and then it got colder and colder with the end point being about 60 below.
And there you are.
Yes, yep. It was brisk, but you're dressed for it. Many, many layers of clothing. This is on Norton Sound, which is on the Bering Sea, the ocean, and we encountered a ground blizzard with about 40-mile-an-hour winds, and they had stopped the race roughly for about close to a day before we ventured out into it. And this segment About 9 teams went out, and only 3 made it across, with 6 stopping and 4 being rescued, I think it was. So it was really brutal conditions. 20 below with that headwind was the hardest mushing I've ever encountered. Those dogs were amazing. They just kept going straight. We couldn't find the trail, except the dogs would find the trail. So it was 10 hours of intense mushing.
And here we're back to some...
This is actually a training run. This is one of my favorite videos of all time, with the sun coming up. This is in December. The sun's only up about 4.5 hours. This is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. All the snow you see on the trees is actually caused by ice fog in this area of Alaska. We had to travel 7 hours north to get to snow because there was no snow in Alaska. You had to go find it. And Alaska's beautiful. I love it up there. It's just a huge state with so much to see. And to have it with the dog team, it's been nice. I've been lucky enough with dogs to be able to travel to various parts of the world and do things like the European Alps and such. And
I was going to say, I know you've done some other races too, haven't you?
yeah, I've done a lot of races. I've done it in the Rockies and the Alps, Canada and Alaska. It's fun because you go on trails which are not normally traversed by people. So you're out there on your own with just animals.
I'll be back to share some more memories after we take this break. Well, undoubtedly the most unusual of the 400 shows we've done was the week I wanted to emphasize the importance of colon cancer awareness. So in addition to talking with gastroenterologist Dr. Frank Welsh, I actually had a colonoscopy. Here's a minute from that show.
Rectal turnaround here first. Rectal vault looks good. There's no sign of any polyps there.
I'm looking at any abnormalities or any polypoid type lesions, which would show up as bumps, or sometimes they're sort of like stalked, like small little mushrooms with a stalk and a head. That's what I'm looking for. It went well. We're finishing up, Don. Yeah, that looks good.
That was an interesting day. You know, over the last 400 shows, some of my favorites have included some very interesting people from the world of sports. People like former Detroit Tiger pitcher John Hiller, Jerry Markbraid, one of the best-known NFL referees, Clyde Lovellette, the first person to win the basketball trifecta of winning an NCAA championship, an NBA championship, and an Olympic gold medal. Local coaching legend Buck Nystrom, and several Olympians. Included in that group was downhill skier Picabo Street, who shared with us just how she felt when she won her Olympic gold medal.
It was a superstar moment, honestly. It felt really euphoric almost. It was kind of dreamy-like, and you had to kind of pinch yourself and say, wow, did that really just happen? Did I really just accomplish what I've wished on 11/11 on the clock? I've wished on stars. I've been wishing and wishing and wishing and hoping and wishing all of my life for this moment that is happening right now. And I'm such a patriotic person too, that it was such an amazing honor. And I didn't really feel like it would hit me as hard as it did when they announced, Picabo Street, United States of America, Olympic gold medal, and up goes the flag, and here comes our national anthem in my honor, and it just was absolutely one of the most beautiful moments I've ever been a part of. And the coolest thing is my brother and my dad were there to experience it with me, and that was very, very neat, because my whole career has been a big family effort.
You said that for ski racers, there's kind of a fine line between going for it and holding back.
Yeah.
Obviously, confidence has to be a huge part of
absolutely
a downhill skier's career. Can you tell us about that?
There's a certain amount of love for that speed and love for the fall line that I've found as a common denominator in a lot of the speed demons that I've met in my life, whether it be ski racers or car racers, even some of the freestyle skiers that ski moguls. It's surprising how much speed they actually get and accomplish while they're on their runs. And there has to be a love for it, I think. I think it's really difficult to come into it being fearful and nervous and not really loving all of that speed and all that fall line. And so I felt like I had an advantage in a way by having such a love for that speed. And the thing is you have to go beyond the edge in order to know exactly where it is. And when you're winning and losing by 1/100th of a second, you have to know right where that minuscule line lies and be able to get right to it and ski just this side of it. But every now and again, you have to cross it in order to keep track of where it is. And that's where some of the injuries come into play.
I'll be back to share another memory in just 2 minutes. You know, since returning to the show in 2015, I've used the closing segment to share some personal thoughts and memories on a variety of subjects. Usually I hope to add a little humor, although it doesn't always work out that way. Of all the subjects we've covered and all the things I've written, nothing received as much feedback as a poem I wrote about a man from Trenary who encountered some problems with all the Marquette roundabouts, and with that in mind, I thought it would be fun to share it with you again this morning. An elderly man left Trenary one day, happy as can be as he went on his way. He headed for Marquette, a dentist to see. He'd get his tooth fixed and pay the usual fee. He came into town on his usual route, but then he encountered his first roundabout. He drove through that circle with trepidation and fear, yet he knew his destination was now very near. But alas and alack, the turnouts all looked the same, so he left that circle heading back from where he came. He said, "I'll come back tomorrow. That's what I'll do. I'll go home and rest and then try it anew." The next day he left Trenary with determination on his face. This time he would win, he would finish this race. He drove through that roundabout with confidence anew. This time he was certain he knew just what to do. Sure enough, he did it right and made the proper turn. Now he knew all about roundabouts that he had to learn. He pulled out heading west on Highway 41 when he hit the 7th Street roundabout and said, "Oh, not another one." He went round that circle. He was sure he knew best, but he wound up on Grove Street, failing that test. Back to Trenary, for his appointment was past. Tomorrow he would make it. He would get there at last. Then came day 3, and he left town once more. As he entered Marquette, he said, "I've been here before." He made his way safely through roundabout 1. He did the same at 7th Street, knowing the battle he had won. But then there it was. Yes, it was roundabout 3. It was there in a spot where no intersection used to be. He made an early exit, and as he came through, there was a 4th roundabout. He didn't know what to do. It would be nice if a happy ending came with this story, but unfortunately our traveler failed to enjoy that glory. To this day, if you drive on the Marquette Bypass, a lonely traveler you may happen to pass. It's a man from Trenary trying to find his way home, not knowing that he is the subject of this poem. You see, he can't escape from the roundabout trap, even though he carefully studied the map. From Front Street to Baraga with 7th in the middle, he just can't figure out the roundabout riddle. Back and forth through each roundabout, that's how he goes. And when he'll escape, nobody knows. And back in Trenary, his friends patiently wait, trying to figure out just what was his fate. But you and I know the story, and it's a sad one, they say, of the man from Trenary who came to Marquette one day. Is there a lesson in this tale of tragedy and woe? If you travel to Marquette, be careful where you go, for the roundabouts are everywhere in the south and the north. Make careful plans for travel before you go forth. And if the man from Trenary you should happen to see, give him a wave and a smile for me. I'll be back in a minute. Well, that's our show of memories for today. It was a lot of fun for me just looking back and remembering far more than I was able to share with you this morning. To say I've learned a lot from all the people I've talked with would be an understatement. I do want to thank all the guests who have been here over the years, and of course I want to thank you for being here to watch and listen. Let's plan to meet again at this same spot again next Sunday morning.